reflect that we have now been joined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Detective Ron Phillips is still on the witness stand on direct examination. Good morning, Detective Phillips.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Detective, you're reminded that you are still under oath, and Ms. Clark, you may continue with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Detective Phillips.
Good morning.
Yesterday, I believe, when we left off, you had gone to the guest unit that is behind the main house at 360 North Rockingham, and you said you went and knocked on the door.
Yes.
When you knocked on the door for the first time, what happened?
I knocked on the door. Nobody answered the door originally, so I bent down because the louvers on the bottom part of the door were open, and I peered into the louvers. Be a hand and an arm in a lying position, and informing the detectives that there was someone in the room lying down, and shortly thereafter someone answered the door.
And that someone that you later determined was Cato Kalin. Is that what you testified to?
Yes.
All right. Now, when you first contacted Mr. Kalin, you identified yourself, sir?
Yes, I did.
What did you say to him?
Told him I was Detective Phillips in the Los Angeles Police Department, and I'd like to speak to Mr. Simpson in the house.
And what was his response? Goes to explain subsequent conduct, right?
He either said that he wasn't there or he didn't know if he was there. I'm not exactly sure now exactly what he said.
Okay. And did you ask any further questions of him?
No further questions of him, no.
Did you want to find out whether there was someone around who could get you into the house to look for Mr. Simpson?
Yes,
Did you make any inquiry of him in that regard?
yes.
And what was that inquiry?
He brought it to my attention that Arnell, Mr. Simpson's daughter, was in the room directly to his right. And he pointed down the walkway to another room.
And so he pointed out Arnell's room in response to your question about where Mr. Simpson was.
That's correct.
Now, did you tell him what you were doing there, why you were at that location?
No.
Why not?
Didn't know who he was to begin with. Didn't want to cause any hysteria around the residents by telling the wrong person the wrong thing. I wanted to tell this to Mr. Simpson himself.
Did you know at that time whether he was related to anyone on the premises?
I had no idea who he was at all.
Okay. So after he pointed out Arnell's unit to you, what did you do?
I walked down to Arnell's room.
And was that right next door to his?
Yes, it was.
And was everybody with you at that point when you walked down to Arnell's room?
Only Van Adder and Lang walked with me. I believe that Detective Furman stayed behind with Mr. Kalin.
Did you actually see him go in and talk to Mr. Kalin?
No, I didn't.
But he did stay behind with him while you went next door.
I didn't see what he did. He just didn't follow me.
What happened next?
Knocked on the room that had been pointed out to me as Arnell's room, and someone asked me who it was, and I said the police, and then a female answered the door.
And that female, did she identify herself?
I asked her who she was, and she told me her name was Arnell Simpson.
And what did you say?
Told her I was Detective Phillips in the Los Angeles Police Department, that we had an emergency, and I'd like to know if her father was in the house. We needed to talk to him.
And what was her response?
She made a statement to either Van Adder or Lang, and I didn't recall exactly what that statement was. It was something to the effect, "Isn't he there?" And then they began to talk to her.
And you said, when she said, "Isn't he there," you mean in the house?
That was speculation.
Well, this is hearsay. It's not for the purpose of explaining subsequent conduct at this point.
I'm just asking for her.
Sidebar,
Yes, yeah.
without the reporter. Thank you. Counsel. Ms. Clark, you may continue.
I'll move on to the next question. And after Arnell asked you that question, what happened next?
Myself and the other two detectives and Arnell walked towards the main house.
Now, during that time, could you hear conversation going on in Cato Kalin's room while you were talking to Arnell?
No.
Did you walk with Arnell somewhere after you spoke to her?
Yes.
And where did you walk?
Walked to the rear of the main house, not to the rear of the main house, but the back portion of the main house, where there was some French doors and another smaller door right next to it.
When you walked toward the main house, did you pass by Mr. Kalin's room?
Yes.
Did you look inside?
No, I didn't.
Where did you go?
Walked up to one door that led into the house, and Arnell Simpson unlocked the door for us and opened the door.
And did you all walk inside?
Yes.
And that was who at that point?
That was Arnell Simpson, myself, Tom Lang, and Phil Van Etter.
You went in through the rear?
Yes.
And where'd you go?
We walked in through the living room area and then into a kitchen area. And from the kitchen area, we walked around to a maid's quarters that was off the kitchen.
All right, now let me ask you something, sir. Before you actually went into the house with Arnell, you indicated that there was a conversation that took place while Arnell was still in her room between Detectives Lang, Van Adder, and Arnell Simpson?
Yes.
Okay. And were you present during that conversation?
Yes.
Do you recall what they said to each other?
I don't recall the entire conversation.
Next question.
All right, when you entered the rear of the house with Ms. Simpson, what happened first? What was the first thing you did?
We walked into the kitchen area, through the living room, and we went into this room right off the kitchen, which turned out to be a maid's room.
Why did you do that?
We went in there to see if a maid named Gigi was in the residence,
Why were you looking for Gigi?
because we had been told outside the residence before we ever entered it that there was a full-time maid that was supposed to be living on the premise. And Arnell had made reference to Gigi when we were outside the residence before ever entering.
What was that reference that she made?
Something to the effect, isn't Gigi in the house, or something of that nature.
So you were looking for Gigi?
Yes.
Why were you looking for Gigi?
Well, we had been told by the West Tech people that she was a full live-in maid, full-time, and Arnell had already also brought her name up. So we thought if we could find her, she may know where Mr. Simpson was at in the house.
And you went into her room then?
We just went into the room briefly, yes.
And what did you see in the room?
There was nobody inside the room, and the bed was completely made, and the room was well organized, and didn't appear that anybody had been in there recently.
Then what did you do?
Walked back out into the kitchen.
Now, was Arnell talking to you during that period of time?
She was right with us.
And what was she saying?
Wanted to know what was going on.
Did you tell her?
I did not.
Why not?
Wanted to find out where her father was first, talk to her father first, and Tom Lang was talking to Arnell at the same time.
But why did you want to talk to Mr. Simpson before you told Arnell Simpson what was going on?
Because I didn't know how upset she was going to get with the information. She may become hysterical about it, and I wanted to keep everything as calm as could be until I could get a hold of Mr. Simpson himself.
Did you want to keep her, did you want her assistance in trying to locate Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
So what did you do?
I asked her if she knew of any way that I could get a hold of her father, and she said that a lady named Kathy, his secretary, always knows where he is. So I then asked her if she could get a hold of Kathy, and she did. She got a hold of a Kathy on the telephone.
Okay. And was that in your presence?
Yes,
Were you present then when she spoke to someone named Kathy?
yes.
And after that, what happened?
She told Kathy on the phone that the police wanted to talk to her, and she handed me the phone.
And then did you speak to someone on the other end of the phone?
Yes, I identified myself as Detective Ron Phillips of the Los Angeles Police Department, and I needed to know if she knew where O.J. Simpson was at.
Did you tell her why?
No, I did not. I told her we had an emergency, but I did not tell her what the emergency was.
Did she ask you?
She asked me what was wrong, and I told her I couldn't tell her. Told her I'd call her back and tell her later.
And again, why didn't you tell her?
But
Oh. You can answer.
it's for the same reason. I wanted her cooperation in finding out where Mr. Simpson was first. Didn't want her to become alarmed and upset and hang up on me and then make the phone call herself.
And why didn't you want her to make the phone call herself?
Because I had the information of what I needed to tell Mr. Simpson, and I wanted to make sure he got it firsthand from me and not secondhand from somebody else and not the facts.
Someone who didn't know what was going on.
That's correct.
And what information did this person give you?
She told me that Mr. Simpson had gone on a red-eye flight the night before and had traveled to Chicago, and that he was staying at the Chicago O'Hare Plaza Hotel.
Did she give you the phone number?
No, she did not. She didn't have it, but I thanked her very much for her cooperation, and I called information and got the phone number.
Okay, did you do that immediately after you hung up with her?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do immediately after you got the number?
Called the hotel in Chicago.
And did you ask for Mr. Simpson?
I asked for O.J. Simpson's room. I asked if Mr. Simpson was registered at that hotel, and they said just a moment.
And then?
Shortly thereafter, a male voice, which I recognized as Mr. Simpson's voice, answered the phone, and I asked him, I said, "Is this O.J. Simpson?" And he stated, "Yes." "Who's this?" And I said, "This is Detective Phillips from the Los Angeles Police Department. I have some bad news for you."
Okay, can we hold on 1 second here?
Yes.
What phone did you make that call from?
The telephone in Mr. Simpson's kitchen.
Your Honor, I have here a board that I've shown the counsel.
Mrs. Robertson? '67.
Thank you. Do you see the exhibit that's just been placed next to you, People 67?
Yes?
And do you see the portion of that, do you see, first of all, what that is?
Yes, it is.
What is that?
It's a general telephone bill from a residence.
And you see the phone number without reading it
Yes?
out loud?
Right.
And do you recognize the phone number?
Yes?
For what, excuse me, was that the phone number of the phone that you used to call Chicago from the defendant's residence?
Yes?
Do you see the portion of that bill that is highlighted?
Yes, I do.
And does that indicate that there was a call made from the phone in the kitchen of the defendant's residence to Chicago at 6:05?
Yes?
Well, I think the objection, I don't think that bill tells us the phone. It's made from the kitchen.
Excuse me.
Sustained.
And that speaks for itself.
Sustained.
I'll withdraw that, Your Honor. Does that reflect that a phone call was made from the defendant's phone on June the 13th at 6:05 to Chicago?
Yes?
And the phone number to Chicago that is shown at 6:05, is that the phone number for the O'Hare Hotel, O'Hare Plaza Hotel that you called?
I don't. It looks like the same phone number, yes.
Ms. Clark, do you want to have that board shown to the jurors in the cheap seats?
What I thought I would do is actually show on the Elmo, Your Honor.
All right.
So,
Let me ask, is this still Mr. Simpson's phone number, counsel? I didn't want to send it out if it was still his phone number.
Regarding the number?
Yes.
Yes, may I say a word to Ms. Clark? If you're on that. Can you take it off Elmo for just a moment? I want to maybe approach on it. Sure. I'm just concerned about some of these other people's numbers. So there's been a lot of calls that have gone out. So let's
All right, thank you, counsel. Ms. Clark, why don't you have one of your assistants take the board down at this point? All right, is there a stipulation that you care to offer?
Yes, Your Honor. Rather than air the phone numbers of everyone else on the bill, we will stipulate that the defendant called, excuse me, that the Detective Phillips called the defendant in Chicago on June 13th at 6:05 a.m. No, let me take it down. At 6:05 a.m. And the call lasted for 5 minutes.
I stipulate the Detective Phillips called Mr. Simpson at 6:05 a.m.
In Chicago on June the 13th.
Yes.
And
From
call
the
lasted-
defendant's-
And the call lasted 5 minutes, and the call emanated somewhere from the defendant's residence.
So stipulate, yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, as I told you, a stipulation is an agreement between the attorneys as to the facts of the case. You were to accept the stipulation as evidence. The reason we're doing this is the phone bill has other persons' phone numbers on it that we just don't want to subject to any undue harassment because of this case. And there's no dispute as to the phone number. All right. Thank you, counsel. I appreciate that.
Your Honor, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. And then you spoke to someone who acknowledged that he was Mr. Simpson.
Yes.
What happened next?
I told him that who I was. I was Detective Ron Phillips from Los Angeles Police Department, and that I had some bad news for him. And he said something about, what's that? And I says, well, I've got some bad news. Your ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, has been killed.
What happened next?
I think the first words out of his mouth were something to the effect, oh my God, Nicole is killed, or oh my God, she's dead. And then he got very upset on the telephone.
And then what happened?
I kept trying to calm him down, and he continued to be upset, which I expected. And he continued to be upset, and I finally said, Mr. Simpson, please try to get a hold of yourself. I have your children at the West Los Angeles Police Station. I need to talk to you about that. And he stopped and he said, what do you mean you have my children at the police station? Why are my kids at the police station? And I said, because we had no place else to take them. They're there for safekeeping. I need to know what to do with your children. And at that time he said, well, I'm going to be leaving out of Chicago on the first available flight. I'll come back to Los Angeles. Is Arnell there? And I said, yes, she is. And he said, let me talk to Arnell, which I gave the phone back to Arnell.
Now, did he ask you when the murder occurred?
I didn't tell him that she'd been murdered. I told him she'd been killed.
Did he ask you when that had happened?
No.
Did he ask you how that happened?
I object to this, Your Honor. For the total Tom did not object to this form of question, Your Honor. This man who just...
Objection, Your Honor.
Wait.
Object, I'd like to object.
Yes, with the sidebar. All right, proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did Mr. Simpson ask you how she was killed?
No,
Did he ask you when she was killed?
no,
Did he ask you if you had any idea who had done it?
no,
Did he ask you where it had occurred?
no,
Did he ask you anything about the circumstances of how his ex-wife had been killed?
no.
Did he proceed to speak with Arnell and give her instructions about the children?
Sustained.
Sorry. Did Arnell have a conversation with him after you spoke to him?
I handed the phone back to her, and I assumed she talked to him. I didn't listen to it.
During the time that you were speaking to the defendant, do you know or could you see where Arnell was?
Yes, she was standing directly behind me and listening to my conversation. Tom Lang was also informing her of what had happened, and she became very not hysterical, but very upset.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Certainly.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, after you handed the phone to Arnell, what happened next?
They kept talking to Arnell, and I believe she wanted to make a phone call to a man that she only described as AC, which she did. And then I walked out of the kitchen.
Where did you go?
I just went over to a doorway that led out to the front of the residence. It was kind of a, I don't know, patio type, well, it's off the kitchen. It leads out to the Rockingham gate, or towards the Rockingham gate.
And what were you doing out there?
Just standing there. Tom Lang was basically talking to Arnell, and was nothing left for me to do, nothing for me to do at that time.
What happened next?
I was approached by Mark Furman, Detective Furman, who walked up to me and said,
Sustained.
Did Detective Furman tell you something?
yes, he did.
Your Honor, this would go to explain subsequent conduct.
I think you can handle this without doing that.
Okay. And after he told you that, whatever he did, what did you do?
I followed him.
Okay. And based on what he told you, why did you follow him?
He wanted to show me something.
Where did you go?
He took me around to the south side of the residence, to a walkway on the south side of the residence. It ran east behind the residence. We walked back there for a considerable distance until we got to a certain point, and he stopped and he pointed out an object to me.
I'm going to put on the Elmo a diagram that has been previously marked, and I'm going to ask that this be marked as the A version of that.
This would be, have you already used the diagram?
I have, Your Honor, the diagram.
66.
All right, people, 66A, you want the Elmo version?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Ms. Robertson, do we have that? All right.
All right, sir, do you recognize the diagram that we've previously marked as People 66?
Yes?
And can you see the area that you had told us you just walked down to follow Detective Furman?
Yes?
Can you use the pointer to point that out for us?
We came out of the residence, walked around the garage, down this long walkway, and went back to here to where there was an air conditioning unit, when that's where he pointed out an object to me.
Okay. Would you please, if you could, look at your monitor, sir, and direct the pointer to show us where you exited the residence and what your path was?
Okay, you'd have to go back up to where the breakfast area is.
Breakfast area?
Yeah,
All
right
right.
here at that's where we exited that residence.
Okay. And then you went out, you said, into the driveway
Yes,
and around the garage?
yes,
Tell us where you went next.
down the other side of the garage, eastbound, all the way back, continue walking. Continue to go farther.
Well, we got a problem here because our...
Going on.
I walk straighter than that.
Why don't we try that again, okay?
How many times did you crash into the walls?
Right.
Just the one time into the garage.
And you tell the pointer when to stop.
Right about there.
All right. And if this could be 66A, Your Honor?
Yes.
And could we have the initials RP on that? Could you, sir, describe for us the condition of the walkway, that south walkway that has been, your path has just been traced on?
Well, it's a concrete walkway. It's quite narrow. It's probably, at some points, only a couple of feet wide, some places several more feet wide, but it has a lot of debris, leaves, and things on the walkway as you walk past. There's a lot of overhanging shrubbery that hangs from the gate, or the fence that's just to your right as you're walking down, that hangs over into that area, that some of it almost even touches the house.
And the walkway itself, sir, was it clean and swept when you walked down there that morning on June 13th?
No, it was not.
What was the condition?
Well, as I said, it had leaves and twigs and, dirt and other things that were back in there.
Your Honor, I have here another board that has... Asked that it be marked People 69? 68.
All right, people 68. Board with 4 photos without A, B, and C.
Asked for it, but they will all be done, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Just makes it easier for all of us.
It does, it does. Are you looking at those, sir?
Yes, I am.
They will be labeled from left to right at the top, A and B, left to right at the bottom, C and D. What is the location shown in those photographs?
This is the walkway to the south of the Rockingham address that I previously stated that I'd walk down.
And does that appear to accurately depict the condition that you found the walkway in that morning?
Yes, it does.
In photograph A, I'm going to put it up on the screen.
Could you please?
You can look at your monitor. Do you see that box hanging out of the wall there?
Yes,
What is that?
it's an air conditioning unit.
And was that unit for Cato Kalin's room?
I would have to assume that's for Cato's room,
Okay.
Cato Kalin's room, yes.
Did you ever go into his room?
No.
Okay. Now, John, can you get B? And photograph B. You see that area of the ground, sir?
Yes,
Is that the condition in which you found it on June the 13th?
yes,
C. And photograph C?
yes,
Is that the position and the condition in which you found that glove?
that's the item that Detective Furman had pointed out to me, yes.
When were you, as you proceeded down the walkway, sir, do you recall whether there were any gates that you had to walk through?
I believe there was 2 gates that we had to walk through, that I remember. There may be more.
Were either one of them, was there a lock on either one of them, or were they open?
They were open.
When you walked through... Go back to the diagram, if you don't mind. When you walked through the first gate, sir, were you able to see the glove on the walkway?
No,
When you walked through the second gate, were you able to see the glove on the walkway?
no.
How close to the glove did you get before you were able to see it?
Quite a ways, I mean, very close to it. It was light outside, but it was still dark in that area because of the overhanging shrubbery. Basically, I had never seen this item before, so I didn't know where to look.
And so how close did you have to get to it before you actually saw it?
I got to it within about possibly 3 or 4 feet.
Did you touch it?
No.
And when you got to within 3 or 4 feet of it, what did you do?
I stood there and shined a flashlight on it and observed what it appeared to be, and then told Mark, I says, let's go back to the house and inform Van Ander and Lang of this.
Did you think that was significant, that glove?
Overruled.
Well, it appeared to be some... No, I'm sorry.
You can answer the question, yes or no. Did it appear to you to be significant?
Yes.
Next question.
And why was it significant to you?
It looked like it was also the same type of glove that we had seen at the Bundy location.
Did you ever go back farther than that glove to see what was behind the guest units in that house?
No.
After you got within 3 to 4 feet of the glove, what did you do?
Walked around, turned around, and went back into the house
And how did you enter the house?
through the same door I'd exited.
That breakfast area?
Yes.
Did you give some instruction to Mark Furman?
He came with me.
Right. After seeing the glove, did you give him some instruction?
I gave him some instructions that we were to notify Van Ander and Lang of what he had found and what he had showed me.
And so did both you and Detective Furman go back into the house?
Yes.
What happened next?
Detective Furman, I believe, walked up to Detective Van Ander first and told him what he had basically told me, and then Van Ander and Furman then left and went to the same, looked like they were going to go to the same location that I had, but I did not go with them.
Where did you go?
Stayed right where I was at, right by the kitchen door, kitchen breakfast cook door.
What happened next?
I stayed there. A short time later, Van Ander and Furman came back, and they had a conversation with Detective Lang, and then Lang and Furman took off the same direction that we had gone before, but I didn't go with them again.
Did you stay in front with Detective Van Adder?
I don't know if Van Ander was with me the whole time. I was just basically standing around, you know, talking to people at different times, but not doing anything.
Where were you standing around in? What area?
In that breakfast area, the front part of the house, front part of the residence,
Okay.
that breakfast area.
Now, this was not your case anymore, is that right?
Not my case at all.
So why were you still there?
Because my partner, Detective Furman, was still showing Van Ander and Lang certain items that he had found, and we had not left the location yet from when we arrived.
Now, let me ask you something, sir. You had said earlier that the way you need to make notification is in person. That's the way that's preferred, is that right?
If it's practical, you do it in person, yes.
But you didn't wind up doing it that way, did you?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because we found someone at the residence that put us in touch with Mr. Simpson. We'd already made contact with members of his family, Arnell Simpson. It was kind of a mute point to sit there and say, no, I'm not going to tell you anything, and leave the residence. So we got a hold of Mr. Simpson and informed him over the telephone, which wasn't the exact way that we'd like to have done it. But that's the way the situation presented itself.
And what do you mean that's the way the situation presented itself? Were you concerned that the media was going to find out before him?
Sustained.
I'm sorry. Let me withdraw that. What were you concerned about? Why did you tell him on the telephone?
Well, as I said, when we got there, we'd already contacted 2 people at that residence. We'd already told them we had an emergency. We were trying to look for him. It would have been very, very insensitive to just go, I'm sorry, he's not here, we're going to leave. People can find out later why we were here. She said she could get a hold of her father, so we got a hold of her father and gave him the information that we had to give him. It's not that we would love to have given it to him in person, had he been there, but he wasn't there in person, so we used the telephone.
During your phone call to Mr. Simpson, can you tell us where Detective Van Adder was? Did you know?
No, I don't.
Did you ever inform Detective Van Adder of what Kathy Randa told you about the whereabouts of Mr. Simpson?
I don't know if I told Van Adder or I told Lang, because Lang was in the kitchen with me with Arnell.
He was in your immediate vicinity?
Yes?
Now, after Detective Lang came back with Detective Furman, what happened next?
They asked Mark Furman and I to go back, Tom Lang did ask Mark Furman and I to go back to the Bundy location.
And for what purpose? What were you going to do?
Tom had asked Mark to go back to the Bundy location and look at the glove at the Bundy location and get another look at it and see if it was in fact a match to the one that we had up at the Rockingham location.
And then what happened?
Mark Furman and I left the Rockingham location and drove back to the Bundy location.
So you left, you went back in your car
Yes.
together? When you went back to the Bundy location, did you see where did you go? What did you do?
We parked our car. I saw Mark Furman walk over to the Bundy location. He was going to take a closer look at the glove, and I saw Lieutenant Spangler and Captain Dial and some other command staff standing in the middle of the intersection, and they were looking at me, and I walked over to them to give them information that I had received, or what had been done in the last hour.
And what time was it when you got back to the Bundy location with Detective Furman?
It was about 6:30.
And you saw him walk over towards the location?
He walked over to the crime scene location, and I walked over to Lieutenant Spangler and Captain Dial to inform them of what had been taking place, and also John Rogers.
Now, was the crime scene still taped off?
Yes?
And did you see anyone walking on the front walkway that leads from the sidewalk of Bundy to the front steps of the condo?
No, there was no one walking around.
Your Honor, could we cut the feed, please?
People's Exhibit 55.
Can you-
Officers are directed not to attempt to take photographs of the screen.
Can you tell us who that is pointing to the evidence in that picture, sir?
That's Detective Mark Furman.
Is that what he was wearing all night that night?
Yes?
That's how he was dressed?
Yes?
From the time you arrived at Bundy at 2:10 a.m.?
Well, the same questions regarding Mark Furman. Not having exactly.
Overruled because there was some other testimony regarding clothing in the interim.
What was that answer, sir? Is that
Yes.
how he was dressed when you arrived at 2:10 a.m.?
Yes?
And the location that he is pointing to, you recognize that?
Yes?
What's he pointing to, sir?
It's pointing to the location where the glove is.
And is that the direction in which you saw him leaving when you went to talk to Lieutenant Spangler?
Yes, I did not see this photograph taken.
And this is People's Exhibit
55?
55.
Cut. Jonathan. All right, and at some point while you were there, after you got to Bundy, did another detective arrive?
Yes, Tom Lang returned.
How long after you got back to Bundy did he arrive?
Probably 10 or 15 minutes.
And what did he do?
He began to do his crime scene investigation of the Bundy location.
Did he make some request of you, sir?
Yes, he did.
And what was that request?
He asked me to make the first phone call to the coroner's office to give them the first call.
What does that mean, the first call?
It's a system that we have worked with the coroner's office where the first call informs them basically what we have. It's not a call to come out to the location, it's just to inform them of what we have. So the coroner's office can make preparations that their truck or one of their technicians is going to be needed over in the West Los Angeles area so they can have more control over their personnel, time-wise.
I think you indicated earlier, sir, that around 3 a.m. you wanted to call the coroner, but Lieutenant Spangler told you not to.
Overruled.
Yes?
Can you explain to us why you wanted to make the first call when you already knew the case was going over to another set of detectives and not yourself.
Well, I wasn't going to request the coroner at the location. I was just going to make the first call notification to the coroner, informing them what we had, which is exactly what I did at 6:50. It was still the first call.
So they'd be ready when the final detectives made the call?
Yes,
All right, so you made the first call notification for them to prepare at 6:50?
yes,
Was there a transcript prepared of your discussion with the coroner's office that morning?
I believe so.
And have you seen that?
Yes.
One, Councilwoman?
This is the first page of the transcript, Your Honor, prepared. I believe a portion of this was shown to the jury during Mr. Cochran's opening statement. I'd ask that this page be marked Peoples 69.
69.
You're going to have to probably...
One, please.
All right. Do you recognize what you see there?
Yes.
Does that appear to be the first page of the transcript of the conversation you had with the coroner's office on the morning of June the 13th?
Yes.
In the very first passage where you are speaking, sir, do you recognize that passage where you tell them you have a double homicide?
Yes.
And in that first passage, what do you recall having that conversation?
Yes, I do.
What were you trying to convey to them in that first response? That first. This is. May we approach? This is foundational, Your Honor.
All right.